Can a voice really stop time? Can one single song silence a room filled with doubt? On a cold evening in Ireland, under bright stage lights that revealed every fear and flaw, a quiet man from the Philippines stood alone. He did not look like a superstar. He did not walk with confidence. He did not carry the presence of a legend. But legends are not always seen at first glance. Marco Reyes stood on that stage with trembling hands and a heart full of memories. Behind him was a lifetime of small performances in crowded streets. Behind him were nights when the only applause came from passing strangers. Behind him were years of being told that dreams like his were too big for someone like him. In the audience, thousands waited. Some curious. Some skeptical. At the judges' table sat Simon Cowell, known for his raised eyebrow and unmoved expression. He had heard thousands of singers. Voices that tried too hard. Voices that faded too fast. The stage lights felt heavy. The silence felt louder than noise. And somewhere far away, in a small home in the Philippines, Marco's sister Liza watched the screen with folded hands and hopeful eyes. She knew the story no one else knew. She knew the sacrifices. She knew the nights when Marco almost gave up. But this was not just another audition. This was a question waiting to be answered. Could a simple man from a distant island carry the spirit of Elvis Presley? Could his voice be strong enough to cross oceans? Could he do more than impress? Could he move hearts? As Marco closed his eyes and the first note prepared to leave his lips, the entire theater leaned into the unknown. Because sometimes, history begins in silence. And sometimes, the most unforgettable voices come from the most unexpected places. The music was about to begin. Marco Reyes was not born into music halls or bright stages. He was born in a small coastal town in the Philippines, where the mornings smelled of salt and the nights were filled with the sound of distant waves. His childhood was simple. Sometimes too simple. His father had been a fisherman. His mother sold homemade food near the local market. Money was never enough, but love always was. Marco grew up listening to old cassette tapes that his father kept in a wooden box. Among them was the voice of Elvis Presley. That voice became his escape. As a boy, he would sing quietly while helping his mother wash dishes. He would hum melodies while walking barefoot on dusty roads. Music was never loud in his life. It was always soft, personal, almost secret. When his father passed away, something inside Marco became quieter. He became the man of the house before he was ready. He worked small jobs. He carried responsibility on shoulders that once carried only dreams. But every night, when the world was asleep, he would sit by the window with his old guitar. He sang to the stars. Not for fame. Not for applause. Just to feel close to something bigger than his struggles. Marco was shy by nature. He avoided attention. He smiled politely but rarely spoke about himself. Many people saw him as ordinary. A man with simple clothes. A man with tired eyes. A man with quiet hopes. But inside him lived a storm of emotion. He often doubted himself. He often wondered if dreams were meant only for other people. Still, he never stopped singing. Even when customers ignored him. Even when crowds walked past without listening. Now, standing on Ireland's Got Talent stage, Marco felt the old fear rising again. His hands were cold. His heartbeat was loud. But somewhere deep inside, the boy who once sang to the ocean was still alive. And tonight, that boy was ready to be heard. Dreams are fragile when life becomes heavy. For Marco, the weight did not fall all at once. It came slowly. Like rain that never seemed to stop. After his father's passing, responsibility became his shadow. Bills stacked quietly on the small wooden table. His mother's health began to weaken. Liza was still in school, holding books that felt heavier than they looked. Marco stopped thinking about stages. He started thinking about survival. He worked at construction sites under the burning sun. He carried cement instead of melodies. Dust replaced music in his lungs. At night, his body ached. His hands were rough and cracked. Sometimes he would stare at his old guitar resting in the corner of the room. It gathered dust the way his dreams did. There were nights when he almost sold it. Moments when he believed music was a luxury he could no longer afford. People around him were practical. They said singing was just a hobby. They said real men focused on steady income. They said dreams did not pay hospital bills. Marco began to believe them. The laughter in his voice slowly faded. He sang less. He smiled less. Loneliness wrapped around him like a quiet fog. He felt invisible in crowded places. Just another worker in a helmet. Just another man trying to survive. But the deepest pain was not poverty. It was regret. Regret for every time he chose silence over song. Regret for every opportunity he let pass because fear felt safer than failure. When Ireland's Got Talent auditions were announced, Liza was the one who insisted. Marco resisted. He felt too old. Too ordinary. Too late. What if he failed publicly? What if the world confirmed his worst fear, that he was never meant for more? Yet beneath the doubt, a small voice whispered. What if this was the last chance? That question followed him onto the plane. It followed him onto the stage. And now, under the bright lights, Marco stood face to face with the fear that had controlled his life for years. The first note left Marco's lips softly. It was not loud. It was not forced. It was honest. For a brief second, the audience remained still, unsure of what was coming. Simon leaned back in his chair, his expression calm, almost distant. He had heard many Elvis tributes before. Most of them tried too hard to copy. But Marco did not try to imitate. He closed his eyes. And he sang the way he used to sing to the ocean. The second line carried more strength. The third carried pain. Something changed in the air. The room that once felt heavy with doubt began to feel lighter. Heads slowly lifted. Whispers disappeared. The tone of his voice was warm, rich, and strangely familiar, yet different. It was Elvis, but it was also Marco. Simon's posture shifted. His eyes narrowed, not in criticism, but in focus. This was no longer just another audition. As the chorus arrived, Marco let go of fear. All the years of silence, all the regret, all the buried hope. They poured into that moment. His voice rose, powerful and steady. And suddenly, the audience erupted. People stood to their feet before the song even ended. Some wiped tears they did not expect. The stage lights no longer felt harsh. They felt warm. For the first time in years, Marco was not thinking about bills. He was not thinking about failure. He was simply singing. And in that surrender, something extraordinary happened. Simon, the man rarely impressed, slowly removed his glasses. His expression softened. Not because Marco sounded exactly like Elvis. But because he sounded like someone who had lived every word. In that moment, Marco realized something unexpected. He had never been trying to become Elvis. He had only needed to become himself. And that realization changed everything. That night was not only about a performance. It was about a man who almost gave up on himself. Marco did not walk onto that stage as a legend. He walked in as someone who had doubted his own worth for years. And that is what made the moment powerful. The applause faded. The lights dimmed. But something inside him remained bright. He realized that success is not always about becoming the best. Sometimes, it is about finally allowing yourself to be seen. For years, Marco believed he was too ordinary. too late. Too small for a big dream. Yet the world does not measure greatness the way fear does. Greatness is not in copying someone else perfectly. It is in carrying your own story with courage. He did not need to sing better than Elvis. He only needed to sing with truth. And truth travels farther than imitation ever could. Back in the Philippines, Liza watched with tears streaming down her face. Not because her brother had impressed Simon, but because he had defeated the voice inside that told him he was not enough. That was the real victory. Life will always bring responsibilities. Bills will come. Loss will hurt. Doubt will whisper. But dreams do not disappear unless we silence them ourselves. Marco's journey reminds us of something simple and powerful. It is never too late to return to the part of you that once believed. It is never too late to pick up the guitar again. And sometimes, the stage you fear the most is the very place where you finally find yourself. Because in the end, it was not about being better than Elvis. It was about being brave enough to be Marco.